Hello everybody and welcome back to the same lesson as yesterday. For reasons I can't explain, the sound didn't work for half of the lesson, so I'm re-recording it. But this just means that I've already written out all of the things that I had already made for the notes, and I can't exactly go back on that because this is adding to the file. So we're just going to go through it, and I'm going to explain what I was saying when the sound wasn't working, and hopefully the sound works for this one. So this lesson's talking about historical materialism, which is one of the key concepts and one of the broader ideas that we need to understand if we're trying to understand mainly a Marx and Engels style of socialism. And really this fits into the core ideas of socialism and just helps build our understanding of how this socialism operates. And it means we also get to talk about things such as class consciousness, class conflict, as well as things like alienation as well. All these different kinds of ideas that form part of the nexus of the socialist ideas. So historical materialism is what we would describe as a mode of historical analysis. And what this means is it's a way in which we can explain how history develops, how people and societies develop throughout history. And historical materialism places the material conditions of individuals at the center of this historical analysis. And it also positions these individuals, these material conditions, as dynamics of opposing forces that are in conflict with each other. Now, this is known as something called dialectical materialism. And dialectical it's a Hegelian concept, it's a Hegelian word, so it came from Hegel. Marx was a young Hegelian, he was somebody who was a follower of Hegel in quite a lot of detail, and what he did was take this concept of dialectics, the idea of opposing forces in conflict with each other, and apply it to broader political and societal concepts, such as historical development. And this is where historical materialism really starts to take shape. And it basically means that history can be described as a struggle between contending groups within society, and the struggle is their material struggle, the material conditions in which they live. And this is something that has occurred throughout history. The dialectics, or the opposing forces, are created by relations of production under different systems, And in the system that we live in today, these relations of production are created under capitalism, and that's what leads to dialectics. But under other systems like feudal system, mercantile capitalism, etc., we have different modes of production. And so we have a situation where the opposing forces in society, the opposing groups, exist and develop through society. So, for example, within a feudal society, you have the serf and the landowner, the person who owns the serfs. You will have in a slave society, for example, you'd have the slave and the slave owner. These are opposing positions within society. And under capitalism, we have the owner class and the worker class, or has been known by Marx, the bourgeois. Those are the people who own the means of production, they're the owner class, and the proletariat are those who do not own the means of production. And so what the proletariat do to survive is that they sell their labour to those who own the means of production. And this, under as we understand socialism from a Marxist perspective, effectively the socialism from a Marxist perspective is the communal ownership, the taking back of the means of production, the workers in society owning those means of production. And when we're talking about the selling of labour, Marx came up, or at least developed on a theory known as the labour value of theory, the labour theory of value, which states that the value of a product is at least partly influenced by the labour that went into the creation of said product. Marx does specify that it isn't just labour in and of itself. You actually have to also take raw materials, the raw means of production, and infuse labour into that, and that creates the value of different products. And so Marx described a situation where the proletariat had to sell this labour. So the profit, the value that came out of this labour, was sold to the people who own the means of production. And so this led to a system of class structure and class conflict. Because the means of production and the relation of those who own it and do not exist, we have a situation where we have those who own means of production and those who do not own the means of production. This can create contradictions between classes. Those who own the means of production profit from the labour of those who do not. And those who do not own the means of production, want to enjoy the fruits of their own labour. And this can lead to a state of alienation. So where you have a situation where the worker sells their labour for profit that they do not get to enjoy, we suggest, from a Marxist perspective, this is known as exploitation, the exploitation of that labour. And the exploitation of that labour, the separation from the worker and the product and the fruits of their labour, creates a state of alienation where they are alienated from their labour. And the combination of alienation and exploitation leads to a communal class consciousness, where societies and members within the society become aware of the community and the kinds of struggle that they all share within that particular class. And so, when it comes to what can be done about this, Marx and Engels first of all argue that the state perpetuates the existence of this class structure. They uphold the existence of capitalism, and as such Marx was not a statist in that regard. And as such, a socialist revolution must overthrow the state and take over the means of production. So a socialist revolution overthrows the state, and therefore the workers take control of the means of production. And this is what Marx would describe as a transitionary period. So while Marx didn't delineate between socialism and communism, he mainly just used the word communism, and only really ever used the word socialism when critiquing utopian socialists, for example. We have a situation where we have a transition period into a communist state, into a so-called communist state, whereby we have what Marx described as a dictatorship of the proletariat. Now, dictatorship in Marx's time was not necessarily as pejorative as it is in today's society. Dictatorship simply meant ownership or complete control. So, dictatorship of the proletariat would refer to control by the proletariat. The proletariat control the means of production, they control the fruits of their own labour, and they can eliminate this sense of alienation from the fruits of their labour. And this dictatorship of the proletariat is necessary for the transition into a communist state, a classless, moneyless, stateless society, where we have where it's not entirely clear what the general end goal is for Marx and Engels, or for any specific communist, because as things have developed and as theory has developed, that we've all got with a number of different conceptions of what it really means to live in the communist state. And it also states that in a system, a transitionary period where the workers own the means of production, both class structure as well as exploitation cease to exist. There doesn't exist a class structure because now everybody owns the means of production, rather than there being a select class that do and a select class that do not. And this also means that exploitation doesn't exist because you own the means of production. You do not get, your labour is not exploited by those who own the means of production because you own it yourself. And this is really just adding further to our understandings of socialism and a number of more other ideas within socialism. In the next few lessons, we're going to start to develop our understanding further and start to look at different varieties of socialist thought. And this would mean looking at things such as social democracy, democratic socialism, as well as utopian socialism, and also things like Marxist-Leninism, and how these other philosophical thinkers have come in and developed these ideas further.